Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. And of course, a lot of confusion and a lot of criticism relative to the president's trade policy, especially using tariffs. Delighted to have back with us today Auron McIntyre. He's the author of Total State, How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. He's also the host of the Auron McIntyre Show, and he's a columnist for the Blaze News. And there's a picture of the cover of his book called Total State. He has a website, auronmcintyre.substack.com, and there's the picture of that landing page as well. Auron, good to see you again, friend. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We now have a couple of weeks under our belt with this tariff exchange going on and imposing them and then pausing them. Do you see any downside to this?
Well, obviously, uncertainty is always something that scares global financial markets. And going into this, Donald Trump had been very clear that ultimately his goal was to use tariffs in a way that he felt would create better trade deals for the United States and possibly engage in some reshoring of critical industries that would both help the population when it came to jobs and secure our supply lines for national security purposes. Ultimately, I think that's a good goal, but one does wonder in the way that some of this has been rolled out. We're looking for a situation in which we can move our closest trading partners together, feel like we're getting better deals, have their tariffs against us dropped, while also putting as much distance between us and China ultimately as possible. That's a very difficult task to undertake, and it will come with some costs. But I think the Trump administration does need to be a little more disciplined and measured in the way that they go about this.
Too much, too fast?
I think, again, it really is the uncertainty that makes people concerned. We're putting them out, then we're taking them back. It seems like the tariffs go up and down every day. The products that they're going to apply to might change. Again, I think there is a good negotiating tactic that Trump, of course, uses. Of course, he talks about it in The Art of the Deal, about setting the anchor, making the big ask, making people setting them off center and then pulling them back and saying, well, maybe we can do a better deal. Maybe we can have something that's a little more reasonable. And then they feel like they've kind of gotten away with it. That's something that Trump has done over and over again in his rhetoric, in his political dealings, in his business dealings. And so we shouldn't be surprised to see that tactic used here. Unfortunately, it seems like we might not have a steady hand at the till as to where we were coming back to. What was the actual goal? What was the exact number that you're trying to get to? He can't reveal all of that up front, but you do want to feel like ultimately there is a plan in place to know exactly what you're trying to dial in for that economic goal.
So has this created some national security concerns?
Well, again, I think ultimately the hope is to dial down the national security concerns by making our supply chains more reliable. We discovered during the pandemic that we don't make most of our antibiotics or most of our respirators. The people who do are in the very country where the virus we were trying to fight was created. And so you have to ask yourself, do you really want to be completely dependent on that country for life-saving drugs? We currently make semiconductors to launch missiles in China. We use the semiconductors made there in China to launch missiles for the United States military. If this is really our most important geopolitical foe, do we really want to be using their products in our military apparatus? It just doesn't make sense. So if properly executed, this could increase our national security. I think that the situation we had right now with trade with China was just untenable. However, it is a very painful process to decouple yourself from China. And this is always something that presidents have to deal with. Nixon opened China, ultimately trying to drive a wedge between it and the Soviet Union, so we did not have a giant unified communist bloc. That was probably the right move at the time in hindsight, but now we have to deal with the fallout. And the fallout is that we have entangled ourselves with a civilization that is ultimately hostile to our way of life. It is going to continue to be a geopolitical competitor. We need to change that.
All right. So in the meantime, China is being cornered. And to your point, they still make a lot of things that we need. And by the tariff war going to 145% and that tit for tat going on, and majority of our pharmaceuticals coming from there, what's the antidote here?
Well, again, the incentive you're hoping to create is a reshoring process. One of the reasons you have tariffs in the first place is to make the product more expensive to import that encourages production inside the United States. The difficulty is always in the transition period. You have to have a certain amount of time where the incentive encourages businesses to spin up production, but you still have a lag in between. You could try to go ahead and do that on your own, but then you're talking about a state controlled economy, a centrally planned economy, which I don't think is what anyone is trying to move towards. And so incentives are really your only option. The difficulty that we ultimately have is that the efficiency and profit that we have created by offshoring is significant, but it has significant downsides, and those downsides don't show up on balance sheets. Yeah, it might be cheaper to grow all of our food somewhere else, but as the Romans learned, if you grow all your grain in Egypt and then you lose access to your grain in Egypt, suddenly you have a national security crisis. We can make all of our pharmaceuticals, we can mine all of our minerals, we can outsource all the production of our semiconductors somewhere else, and that might feel better in the moment. It might be slightly cheaper or logistically might work for us in that moment. But if a crisis comes, we're in big trouble. And so we have to go through a certain level of growing pain. The question, of course, is, will it be worth it? And I think that's the questions most Americans are asking when it comes to the tariffs.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell yesterday really came out and lambasted the president. It drove the market through the floor. Do you think he was accurate in his assessment?
Unfortunately, I didn't see those comments, so I can't speak directly to what he said there.
Okay. Basically, it's the typical response that this is going to create inflation at a very high level that could maybe even be unsustainable. I mean, I don't know. Now you have the Fed chair working against the president. I don't know who wins in that argument.
Yeah, and this is one concern that I had with the tariff program. There's nothing wrong with using tariffs strategically, but you need to have an understanding that coming along with that will be tax cuts somewhere else. The point of tariffs is not just to raise more income for the government. We didn't suddenly become big fans of high taxes. The reason to use them is to strategically maneuver a better trade situation while reducing the burden elsewhere on Americans. If you could pair this with tax cuts, if you could pair this with a reduction in government spending, then we're talking a situation where we might not be encouraging the inflation. But if you just slap the tariff on top of all the other taxes and continue to increase government spending the way that we have been doing continuously for many decades, then you can't be surprised ultimately when people have fears that inflation will follow.
So to that point, I think the president did something really smart when he held up the chart. America saw the imbalance, and that was a good thing for them to see. And a lot of people now go, "Oh, I get it. Boy, they're paying this and we're paying that." So I think he got a major pass when he saw that. But do you think the president, and can he, tell the American people how close we were, and maybe still are, to insolvency if we don't continue to cut expenses, raise revenue, and have DOGE continue to find fat and fraud?
I'm going to be honest with you. I know that a balanced budget is a big seller for a lot of conservatives, but ultimately, I think for most voters, their major concern right now is not financial solvency. Maybe it should be. It probably should be. But if we're talking about the purely political aspect of this, most people have a hard time actually understanding a number that large when it comes to debt. The idea that we're just trillions of dollars and it's not real to them. It's all kind of monopoly money in a sense. They know that we should probably be making more than we spend, but it's hard for them to really quantify the enormity of the debt and the problem that it really represents. For many of his supporters, I think ultimately they'd rather see a focus on things like deportations, which obviously are in the news and are a big issue right now. But that is more what Trump won on. Again, he did win on trying to reshore, reindustrialize, create jobs for the middle class. However, many people will have a difficulty understanding that one-to-one. And again, if you're looking at the insolvency of the American financial situation, that might be separate from whether or not this, in the short term, incentivizes more manufacturers to build in the United States.
Okay, I understand that. So in the meantime, Doge is certainly finding a lot of fat and fraud, and I think we're not surprised, but we're shocked that it's as bad as it is, right?
Yeah, obviously you have a bunch of people still just drawing social security checks well after, 30, 40 years after their death. We're always told that this stuff doesn't exist, but most of us knew that it did, and it's nice to finally see that uncovered. Of course, Doge went in with USAID and cut a large amount of programs that were specifically designed, if we're honest, to fund anti-American sentiment and progressive ideology across the board. Again, many people suspected at some level that a lot of this leftism was funded, that there was something behind it, but many of them didn't recognize it was their tax dollars getting the job done. So it's very, very satisfying to see those cuts, because not only are we saving money and putting ourselves in a better financial situation, we're ending the funding some pretty evil stuff at the end of the day.
So what we found out in this fraud is a lot of this money was getting kicked back to NGOs, and once you start looking at the NGOs, you realize they're people. And do you think that we'll ever see a connection between the fraud and the kickbacks?
I don't think we'll probably see a lot of prosecutions, if that's what you're asking. Unfortunately, many of these people are pretty adept at avoiding that, and they're connected in a way that allows them to not really see much blowback for this kind of thing. The NGOs were really treated as a cost of doing business. The progressives understood something that conservatives don't. Having an extra governmental network of political actors who are all funding each other, all raising up new leadership, all paying the way for activists. This is a big deal. This is what encourages a lot of people to get involved in politics, for better or for worse. Patronage is often the heart of politics. And so the left being able to do this was a huge deal for them. It allowed them to manipulate many processes. It allowed them to have a weight in things like the media and in academia and even in the medical sphere that they otherwise wouldn't have. But ultimately, I don't think that we will probably see prosecutions, even though there is obviously clear evidence that a lot of this money probably wasn't going to do anything that was good for the United States or the American people.
At the end of the day, if they just stop funding it, that's a huge savings to the budget.
Absolutely. Again, it has the beautiful thing of being both a massive financial win for the United States. It's a big savings to the budget. We're getting rid of that fraud and that waste that American people don't want to see with their tax dollars. And we're also getting rid of political enemies and the funding that they're using to push terrible programs. So it's the best kind of win. It's a financial win, it's a moral win, and it's a political win all simultaneously.
Switching your attention just quickly over to the judicial challenges that the president's having with these lower court judges, which is so interesting. I think we're also seeing what the Democrats had as their final net, and that was to get control of the judiciary, to basically get what they want. Boasberg, as you know, came out yesterday and said that he's now processing probable cause for contempt of the administration. I don't know what your take is on that. Does the Supreme Court, though, ultimately step in and correct this nonsense?
Yeah, I don't know how many divisions that judge commands, but I got a feeling he's probably not going to be putting any administration members in contempt of court there. Ultimately, I think that what we're recognizing this time is in the first round of Trump's administration, we saw the battle between him and the bureaucracy, what many people call the deep state. And we recognized that these unelected bureaucrats were going to do anything and everything they could to hold up Trump's agenda. This time around, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, J.D. Vance, we're all talking about the managerial class, the administrative state, the deep state, and the need to battle against them. They were much more aware of that problem. This time, it seems like the left has come with a different strategy. This time, the focus has been through the judges, as you're pointing out, because Trump is doing more this time. He's taking more executive action, and that gives them more of an avenue to challenge in court. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of leftist activist judges continue down this road unless the Supreme Court steps in. That said, given the tenor from the Chief Justice on this issue, I don't think he's interested in stepping in. He's already kind of come out against Trump, saying that he's trying to protect the the independence of the judiciary, the credibility of judiciary. But honestly, I think Roberts is doing the opposite. He's opening up to a lot of scrutiny. It's very clear that these maneuvers are strictly political, and if something isn't done, then ultimately these judges are going to end up discrediting their bench, because who is going to look at someone who is ruling that we have to return gang members to the United States who are already here illegally due to some misunderstood notion of due process? Who's going to look at that and say that this is ultimately a legitimate force in American governance?
On the surface of the case, it seems what the judge is trying to do with this probable cause for a contempt charge in itself is weak. The charge itself is weak. I mean, even Dershowitz said over the evening he should be held in contempt of court because he's pushing something that there isn't enough to support.
Well, of course. I mean, but we've seen this before from the left, right? We look at Donald Trump and the way that he was prosecuted in New York, where they basically took a misdemeanor that really didn't even apply. It was a local misdemeanor, state law, and they tried to apply it to a national election and try to turn it into a federal charge. So this is, the fact that the left is coming up with novel legal theories in an attempt to desperately block, the advancing of Trump's agenda is not surprising in the least. This is what they did to try to keep him from getting elected in the first place. So of course they're going to try it once he's in office.
Amazing. Hey, we only had you for one segment. Thank you, Auron. It's always a joy to have you. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out the Auron McIntyre .substack.com is the website. You can check out his show, the Auron McIntyre Show. That, by the way, that's spelled A-U-R-O-N. And there's the picture of the landing page. And check out his book, Total State. There's a picture of the cover of the book as well. Good to see you, friend. Stay in touch.
Thanks again.